In this lesson, we'll introduce the onChange event, which occurs when a user types a character into an input field. So previously, we explored one type of event in React, which was the user clicking on something like a button. And we saw that we could react to that by providing an onClick attribute or an onClick prop to that element, to that button, and then providing onClick with some kind of function or method, the intent being that React would invoke that function or method when that event occurred. So we told React to perform some bit of logic whenever the user clicked on a button, right? We have the kind of exact same principle here with this idea of a change event right here on the switch. Whenever the user clicks this toggle, we run this bit of logic right here. So now we're going to start talking about a similar onChange event, but applied to our input fields. Because what we're eventually going to want to do is to save the user's entry, save whatever the user types into these fields, like email address and password, into the component state. Before we get there, I just want to show you the basic syntax of what this is going to look like. So what we're going to do is add an onChange attribute or an onChange prop to this very first input right here for email. So right here, I'm going to write onChange, and I'm going to provide my curly braces. And as we know, we could provide a function here inline, but what I like to do is to typically delegate this to a separate instance method that we define on our component, very similar to what we have above on line 24 with handle mode change. So I'm going to call this method handle email change, which means right here, I can just say this.handle email change. That method does not exist yet. We can go ahead and define it above our render method. So right here, I will define handle email change. And just like with the method above, I want to just provide an equal sign and make this an arrow function to avoid any issues with the this keyword. So now we know in the body of this method that we're going to have the correct value of this, and this is going to be the app component or the instance of this app class. And as you may recall from earlier in the course, whenever we have an event like this, React will automatically generate an event object, which is just a plain JavaScript object with information and metadata about the event that just transpired. And React will automatically pass that in as the very first argument to whatever we provide here. And we are welcome to use that event object if we want to, or we can ignore it entirely. In this case, I do want to see what this event object looks like. So knowing that React is going to pass in that object for us, I'm just going to give that parameter a name of event. And then in the body of this method, I'm just going to console log the value of event. So remember, this method is only going to run on a change event right here, which represents a user typing a character into this input field. So if I open up my console right now, we're not actually going to see any output because this console log has not executed yet, because this method has not run, because it will only run on change, on the user entering a character into the specific input that we connected this method to, which is our very first input, the email. So right here, I'm going to type a sample character, doesn't matter which one it is. Now you'll notice that we're going to invoke this method, and React is going to pass in that synthetic event object. It's not the exact same thing as a real browser event. It's kind of like React's wrapper around it. React kind of creates this uniform object because different browsers are going to have different properties on their own native event objects. So React kind of creates this substitute that is good enough to play the role and is compatible with all browsers. And you can see that event object being output right here. So if I expand this, we're going to have a whole bunch of properties related to the event. And you're going to notice on this object, there is a property called target, and target is actually going to give us the DOM node representing that element in our page, so the actual input. And on that target, you can think of it as its own object. A DOM node is just a JavaScript object that is representing some element on the page. On that target, we're going to have a property called value. And if I click this right here, we're going to see the character B. So this nested property of event.target.value is going to be the current value of the input, the current entry that the user has entered so far into the input. So this is what we're going to want if we want to preserve whatever the user has typed so far as component state. This value will tell us that current entry, and every single time this method runs, this value will be updated, because remember, this method is going to run on change. So every single character will trigger this method to run. So for example, if I collapse this and I type another character like O, you'll notice the method runs one more time, handle email change runs, and console logs reacts new event object. And if I expand this one and once again go to target and then value, now we have BO. So we have the most latest and up-to-date entry that the user has entered into that input field. And that's going to be important because starting in the next couple of lessons, we're going to talk about how we can save this to our state in our component. So lots more to cover, but we're just taking things one step at a time. And I will see you in the next lesson.